entrepreneurs, did half a PhD, a master's degree, then was involved in doing an interesting research project where I looked at 150 startup programs around the world and try to work out which ones actually made an impact on the companies they worked with. And then was involved in an organization called Iterate that I founded. We worked with about 1,500 companies and helped them basically come up with ideas and test ideas in a weekend boot camp. It was the country's biggest startup boot camp. And then in that consulting space, used a bunch of those ideas to work with the big telcos and banks and insurance companies. And now I run Civitas, which we work with about 120 of Joburg's fastest growing companies. The fastest growing company has gone from about 300,000 to about 20 million in revenue in a year. And a third of the community has tripled revenue since joining. They're about, on average, doing about 15 million in annual revenue. So smallish businesses, but hopefully getting big quickly. So that's just who I am. So a quick intro to pivoting. So this is the framework that, with all that research, we put together on sort of the startup journey, because I think the big thing that founders struggle with is prioritization. It's really the core of being a good entrepreneur is how do you prioritize what's on your to-do list every day. And the way we see it is your first goal is to just launch, get something in customers' hands. Goal number 2, where you should be prioritizing, is how do you get to break even? Just enough that you can pay your living expenses, you're in the profit. And then once you're making a little bit of money and the stress of losing money every month, the big next thing you need to do is reach something called product market fit. I don't know if it's a term you are familiar with, but the idea of product market fit is that it's the only thing that really matters in an early stage company, is finding product market fit. And it comes from a famous Silicon Valley venture capitalist, Mark Andreessen, who wrote the most incredible article. If you haven't read it, a lot of entrepreneurs say it's the most profound article they've read. And when I say a lot of entrepreneurs, like top entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, say this is the most profound article they've read. And what he describes there is that you have companies that get product market fit and companies that don't. And a company that reaches product market fit is one where they start drowning in demand. They just can't keep up with the number of customers. And 90% of companies never get there. And if you want to build a big company, ideally what you want to do is get to product market fit. There's another wonderful definition by the founder of Twitch, who sold his company to a billion dollars to Amazon. And he had this wonderful metaphor around most companies feel like you're pushing a boulder up the hill. When you hit product market fit, the whole feel of the company changes, where it's suddenly you're chasing a boulder down the hill trying to keep up. And that's what it feels like. Suddenly you've solved the customer acquisition, you're growing like mad, and you're just trying to hold on to this business as it grows. The more technical definition is that you're getting good growth. So you're growing 5 to 7% every week, or otherwise you've got high retention or high customer satisfaction, and your customer acquisition cost is at least a third of your customer lifetime value. So that's what we're trying to get to. So important concept to sort of understand what you're trying to do when you're pivoting a business. The second thing you need to understand is what is actual pivoting and what is iteration. So pivoting is basically where you go from one idea to a completely new idea where you're trying to solve a problem. So to give you some practical examples, if you're in the plumbing industry, trying to solve some industry in plumbing, and you start somewhere doing something in the golfing world, that's a pivot. If you're in the golfing world and what you're doing is trying to make golfers better, and you keep iterating that by having a golfing academy and then having online golfing lessons, but the problem stays the same, that's iteration. Ideally, what you should be doing is only pivoting very seldom. You know, you should test an idea for 6 months, 3 months, maybe a year. Iteration should be happening daily or weekly, all the time. So you should always be trying to tweak and improve the model to get to product market fit. So when to pivot is one of the big questions that people have, is how do you know when you should be pivoting a business? I'm in COVID, my business has been hit. Should I be pivoting, or should I be just iterating in the same problem? So a couple of ideas around sort of what are the best founders in the world say around when to pivot, and some of the best venture capitalists is, the first one is that when you start running out of ideas. So the business is struggling. When you first start the business, you're going to have a list of 100 things you can try, to get the idea to work. When that list starts whittling down very small, now we know that it's probably time to look at, okay, well, it's time to pivot. So a practical example there was Slack. Slack was initially a video game company, and they actually tried that for 2.5 years. Initially, they had a ton of ideas, and when it wasn't working, they then launched Slack because they built that as an internal tool. The other time to pivot is when you don't have founder market fit. What we mean by founder market fit is that you see yourself working on this idea for the next 5 to 10 years. So if we can just mute there, is it June? Thanks, June. So a great question to ask is, can you see yourself working on the business idea for the next 10 years? The other one is that if you're in the business and you tried a whole bunch of stuff and you're just getting no growth, revenue's not moving up month on month, revenue's not moving up week on week, and it's really hard to sell. So slow sales cycle, just not moving, probably indication to pivot. Another one is that if you're a great team in a bad market. So this comes from, again and again, if you look at a lot of the top venture capital founders talking, venture capitalists talking, they all talk about how often they'll see an ordinary team in a brilliant market doing incredibly well, and a bad team in a great market do really well. So often what the big aha there is that sometimes the market's just a really bad market. And we'll go through later exactly how you identify, is this market worth actually spending the next 5 years on trying to build, and how to spot that if you're looking for new opportunities. The other big reason to pivot is success is outside your control. So one of the founders in our community runs a company that does registered mail and via SMS and email. And for their business to really take off, there's actually some government legislation that needs to change, that it makes it legal for this to happen, and it's reviewed by the High Court that registered mail is a good thing. That is a bad place to be in, where you actually don't have control over the business. And in many cases, that's probably something you want to get out, or certainly avoid going into that field. I think another big one is you often see young founders trying to sell into the B2B market, where they're having to get to executives or board members, and they don't have a network. They know no executives, they know no board members, they know no CEOs, and they're trying to build a business in this field. That's just crazy. Ideally, you want to be in an area where you're leveraging your network. So where are your friends? Where are your colleagues from? Unless you can actually go and build that network, or bring another co-founder who could come and bring that network along. And then the other one sort of good idea I came across on when I was at Varsity, there was a professor of entrepreneurship from Harvard. And he had this wonderful idea that running a small business is really, really hard, and it's tiring. And what he said is that it's going to be tiring to either build a big business or a small business. So the one option is to end up rich and tired, or poor and tired. So just make sure you start a business that's actually going to grow into something. That always stuck with me. I thought it's a really good idea. So I think what commonly happens is, often we see it with so many of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with, is that people will stick with a bad idea for many, many years longer than they should. Like the warning signs were there in month 6, but they keep going for another 3 years. And I think there are a couple of reasons that you want to watch out for this, that you don't get stuck in the thing where you're working on an idea that just isn't going to take off. And the first one, I think, is ego. People don't want to admit failure. They become attached to their idea. It's their little baby. They don't want to call it ugly. And there's a bit of a psychological defense there. The other one is commitment bias. So there's this bias that they've discovered in psychology, where the more you invest in something, the more you commit to it and value it. So if you do an MBA and they make you work really hard, the likelihood that you're going to value the MBA, even if it hasn't got any value, is really, really high, because you have to work for it. The other one that's going to cause potentially a problem around pivoting is that inspirational stories. There's a whole industry of cheesy motivation, where all they say is that you just have to stick it in another year, and it's gonna change. And I think those big three things create this bias that we stick with our business ideas and businesses longer than we should. So the big thing you want to take away from that is that pivoting is not a big ideal. If you study the history of entrepreneurship, the number of companies that have founders that have, it's their third or fourth or fifth idea that becomes the big one, is massive. And you shouldn't make it a big ideal that if your business has failed for some reason or not taking off, to look in the mirror and go, hey, let's try something else. When not to pivot. So a couple of ideas around when not to pivot. And this is where I see this quite a bit, especially with young founders, I think from disadvantaged backgrounds, is they've got a good idea, but they actually don't have the skills to implement ideas. It's actually a skills issue. The other one is poor execution. You have some founders where they're just not getting a hell of a lot done each week. And actually the problem there isn't the idea. The founder needs actually to get their life in order where they can be really productive for 8 hours a day and actually get their execution right, where they can be having 10, 15 meetings with customers, where they can actually be getting a lot done, where they're on top of all their admin. The other big mistake sometimes founders make is they pivot too soon. So they basically try an idea and they sort of get some initial negative feedback in the first week or two, and they're already on to the next idea. And it almost becomes this pivot happy cycle where you see these founders where they, in 4 years or 3 years or 2 years, they've tried 17 ideas. And you do not want to get into that thing. Ideally, what you want to do is a little bit more measured and really give each idea a couple of months before giving up on it. You don't want to give it a day or two and then kill it. So a little bit of sort of ideas. Any questions on the how to pivot stuff? I think it's just me talking at you. So I just thought I might break it up with a question or two. Okay. So finding great ideas. Okay. So how do we find great ideas? So I have probably looked at about 40 different frameworks for evaluating ideas. And I think the problem with most of those frameworks is they're too complicated. Tony? No. Okay. So I've tried to make it super, super, super simple so that you can literally get the big ideas now and actually apply them this afternoon. When you've got your list of ideas, how do you quickly apply them? So just first, let's understand what a really great idea looks like. The first thing is that it's a big market. So that's how do you determine market? How many people are there? And do they have money? That's a good market. You want customers with money. Another one to think about is access to that customer. So it's even better if you could phone up 10 customers on day one, which are, there are going to be lots of them, and they've all got money. The next thing is a great problem. So a customer should be desperate or very unhappy or looking to buy. So either they've got a solution they buy that they hate, they think sucks, or they're desperate for some kind of solution and it doesn't really exist. The other one is you want something that's going to excite you, something that you can have a career, dedicate a career to. Finally, something that fits your skill set. So there's often, you see a lot of founders trying ideas where they want to do an app, but they actually don't know how to code. I think that's a really tough space to be, where you're in a business where you actually can't build or deliver the product. So you want to make sure that you've got a skill set that you can actually go and deliver that product or service. Ideally scalable. Quick calculation is what's the price? How many customers do I think I'll get? Can it be 100 million rand business? And then ideally poor or weak competition. So something that maybe there's some international people doing, but no one's doing it locally really well, or the people based in Joburg are doing it really poorly. So where to look for good ideas? So I think the best place to look with this whole COVID thing is when newer problems have appeared. So for example, one of the things is there's a bunch of problems around remote work. Is there some opportunity there? I think the danger around these new problems is often people look at the obvious first new problem, but almost what you want to do is be looking at the second or third tier new problem that arises from the new change. So you had a ton of people going into the masks and cleaning services, And as a result, there's just been like this dearth of competition there. But very few people maybe are in the second tier or third tier issue where, could I get into supplying materials for masks, or could I get into some of the cleaning material that will supply the people that sell into that? Something like where maybe you're an import business that's maybe solving that type of thing. So you're a few steps back. The other one is customer problems. So looking around, what problems do you have in your life that have arrived, or your friends or family? Your biggest problems. So what would you pay right now in your life, actually pay someone to do, where you put money on the table? Great place to look for problems. Simple exercise that is maybe every morning, just get in the habit of writing problems lists that you would pay for. There's a lot of data on where great ideas come from on South Africa, on very successful entrepreneurs. And there was a study done on the America's top entrepreneurs. They looked at the Inc. 5000, and they found that 70% of the fastest growing companies in America found the idea from previous work experience. So I would really suggest that you take a look at where have you worked and what were some of the problems that you experienced in those previous jobs or companies that you would have paid for someone to solve. Another surprising idea, because a lot of people say you have to be original, is that I came across two studies, one in Brazil, one by The Economist, where they showed that over 50% of ideas that are venture capital funded, which are the best ideas usually, because venture capital companies, funded companies generally are more likely to become big and successful, are copycat ideas. So they just straight, what are they doing in India? What are they doing in Europe? What are they doing in America? What are they doing in the UK? How do we bring that to South Africa and be the first person to do that? So simple. And there are a couple of really cool websites you can check out: Crunchbase, CB Insights, Mattermark, where they just have lists of all these fastest growing companies in Europe and America. The Inc. 500 is another great one. So you can just go copy a very successful business model there and just bring it here. And then your skill set. So doing an inventory of what are my skills that I have, and what could I get someone to pay me for, is a great way to look for new ideas. Okay, I don't know, just maybe pause for a couple of seconds there. Any questions on sort of evaluating ideas or where to look? We good?
Paul, I've just unmuted everybody.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Paul?
No. Okay, no. Cool. So then the next one is selecting great ideas. So this is the really cool framework that I came across used by Y Combinator, a guy called Dalton Cardwell. If you don't know Y Combinator, they're the top accelerator in the world. Airbnb were funded by them. Dropbox were funded by them. Stripe. They funded over 1,400 companies. They've had 150 of those be worth more than $1 billion Rand valuation. And this is the sort of the idea framework that they use helping their companies pivot. And really what you're looking for is the size of the idea. So how big could this get? Founder market fit. Is this fit my excitement levels and skill set and my network? Ease of launching. How quickly can I launch this thing? Can I launch it this week, or is it going to take 6 months to launch? And then ease of selling. How easy is it going to be sell? Can I, on week one that I launch, make a couple of thousand Rand in sales, or land a couple of deals in the first week or two of selling? So some really cool case studies. So this is a case study of a company called Brex. Brex is a company that was funded by Y Combinator. They initially were doing VR headset hardware. So basically, size of the idea, potentially the market could get big, but it was out of their control. The VR market's still quite small. The founders didn't have deep experience in this area. Really hard to launch because there was a whole hardware problem, lots of money, lots of time period, and they were really struggling to sell it. They pivoted just after the Y Combinator 3-month thing, and they pivoted to credit cards for startups. All the founders were previously in banking, so they had deep skill set there. So could be potentially huge. Every startup needs a credit card. A founder market fit, obviously they could build it. They had the technical expertise. Ease of launching, it was quite a tough one to launch because they needed to get some regulatory and find some partners. ease of selling. Their sales process went to, are you a founder? Would you like a credit card? Yes. Like that's how easy it was to sell. And that's what you're looking for. What's the result? They now have really reached true product market fit. They've raised $100 million. They're a unicorn in only 2 years. And they're on the way to building a very big and successful business. And in fact, a bunch of the banks have copycatted them since then. This is a product called Segment, also a YC case study. Pivoted several times, including 1 year after YC. They're now worth over $1 billion. And basically what they do is they do data infrastructure where they route data from like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the different campaigns into like a single dashboard so you can actually monitor your marketing properly. So initially they had this idea of the classroom feedback tool, not that big of an idea, wasn't that great a fit for the market. They could build it, but they didn't have deep networks in the education space. Ease of launching, quick to launch, they were struggling to sell it. Some traction, but going slowly. They pivoted, didn't seem like that big an idea. They had the problem. They had all the skill set to build it. Launching super quick. They whipped it up in a couple of weeks. Ease of selling. Every startup founder who was big enough, struggling with all the data integration problems was like, wow, I need this. Boom, 8.75 score. Very big and successful business now. So my suggestion would be that what you do is take your list of ideas and actually just score them against those 4 different, what do you call it, metrics, criteria. Okay, so how do you test your idea? So this is really what's been my skill set for the last 10 years, helping founders really quickly test their ideas. So generic, there might be a little bit of nuance for whether it's like a B2B sell or all of that, but I'll give you sort of the generic advice on how to do this. The first thing you do is you've got your idea. Step 1, 2 hours on the first morning of testing your idea is you want a list of customers. So the quickest way to do that is go hit up your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your phone book, and just read through everyone. And whenever there's someone who you think could be a potential customer, you write their name down on an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, a Word document or a piece of paper. And then what you do is once you've got a list of 50 or 100 people out of your network, or maybe it's 10, what you want to do, and just to go back there, obviously if your network doesn't contain a lot of customers, not a great place to start. But what you want to do then is look for a place where all your customers exist online. So you want to go and find forums, meetups, Facebook groups, LinkedIn, where you could actually find a list of all your customers and do the same. The next thing what you want to do is drop an email or a phone call where you go, hi, I've got this new idea. I would love, like you as a friend, to just, I want to bounce it off you, get some advice, see what you think of it. You basically pitch it as, you're helping me out, my business has been wiped out, I need some support getting some input on my idea. And then when you meet with them, you frame it as, I'm going to pitch you this idea, and what I want you to do is give me honest feedback on what you think. And basically what you'll do is you pitch them sort of the product, the pricing, the onboarding, the value proposition, why it's great. Then what you do is you assess their interest. And in some cases, they'll go, wow, this is amazing. I'd love to buy when you launch. That's good. If you're getting that from a lot of customers, that's good. If everyone's going, oh, wow, great idea. And then you say, do you want to be on the wait list when I launch? And they're going, no. And you're getting that for the majority of people, probably a really bad idea. You probably want to move on or at least change your pitch. After you've done about 5 of these calls, if you're doing this really well, you should be able to do 3 to 5 calls every day. You want to sit down and you've taken a list of all the advice that they've given you and notes to improve. And what you do is you take the slide deck that you've created. So you usually just pitch it with a slide deck and you iterate it onto a version. And the idea there is that initially when you start up, you're going to suck at selling. But you're going to learn the strategies and the tools and what you need to say to get customers to buy your particular product. So maybe the first 10 conversations, you get 2 people to sign up. The next 10, it's 4. The next 10, it's 6. The goal should be to get like 4 out of 5 or 8 out of 10 people that you meet with buying. And only once you've done that, you want to then go and start actually building or delivering the product or service. So solve the sales problem before you do the building of the product.
Paul,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I have a question. If you contact customers, how does the POPI Act apply in terms of contacting them?
So I think that I am not an expert on POPI, to be honest. But I think if you're hitting up friends and family and you're just saying, hey, I'm looking for some advice or a coffee, I don't think that's a problem. I think also if you phrasing it in a way that, hi, I'm reaching out to you, I'm writing a unique email to you, and I'm solving a problem that you care about. So, for example, I'll just give you a practical example. We had a peer group discussion. One of the founders has got some some automation software that enables e-commerce companies who have to upload like 5,000 photos onto a website, and they have to regularly update that depending on all the product specs. They have a person doing that. He has a way to automate that with software. And if you hit up an e-commerce person and say, hi, my name's John, I got your details off LinkedIn. I see you run this e-commerce software. We've worked with a bunch of software clients to help this, and this is the problem that we solve. I would love to have a 5-minute phone or Zoom call if you're available, if you feel this is a problem worth exploring. You're going to get a reasonably good response rate. And if each of those is unique, I don't think it's breaking the POPI Act, but you would have to chat to a lawyer about that. Cool. So the final point there is that, you want to be doing 5 meetings a week if you're good, 10 if you're great, 40 if you're exceptional. So some of the top entrepreneurs at Civitas and Y Combinator are currently doing, they make themselves do 8 meetings a day. So half-an-hour meetings or 20-minute meetings, it's definitely doable. And if you do that, you can move 8 times faster than your average founder. So some case studies from Civitas, some Civitas members. So one of our members runs an organization called Bottles. They're the biggest online alcohol delivery app in the country. Obviously, lockdown really stopped their business dead. And what they did is they ended up iterating to grocery delivery for Pick and Pay, where previously they were doing alcohol delivery, and they've actually had record months every month during lockdown. And sort of I checked to Enrico and I said, what were the big lessons you learned from going through this? And the one thing is, he said, it's not a big thing. We're iterating all the time as entrepreneurs, you're improving all the time. So don't be scared. Just do it, was his one bit of experience share. The other one was that initially what he did is he pivoted and basically Pick and Pay did a press release, and suddenly he was drowning in demand, and he didn't realize how big of a task it was to pivot a whole organization of like 50, 100 employees. And basically what ended up happening is you got a bunch of bad reviews where under Bottles that all been like 4.5, like 7, 5-star ratings on the Bottles app. Suddenly, because they were doing all this new stuff and they had a bigger audience and doing record months, a bunch of the stuff in the business broke and the customer service really suffered. So I think the lesson learned there is he probably would have started with a smaller pilot, got it right, and scaled it up over months instead of just pivoting and basically like the whole thing breaking and giving not as good service. So this is another one. A guy, Devin Solomon, a young Jewish entrepreneur, so competent and capable. I think he's going to do amazing things in his career. And he ran around a company called Lee Robot, and they basically were doing marketing for the insurance companies, and they were really hurt by the whole COVID thing. So he, as a side project, came up with an app where you could test for COVID symptoms using an app, and that evolved into basically doing visitor screening and management for large corporates. And wow, the big thing he realized is that it's a lot of work to launch a new business. So suddenly his other business picked up and all the standard challenges apply. He had to go and do proper customer discovery. He had to learn B2B sales. He had to get the pitch deck right. He had to obviously set up all the processes. There was a bunch of hiring. He had to raise money. The other thing he found is that they launched in South Africa, the UK, and SA, and in the US, they got no traction because there wasn't regulation. So his view was the second the regulation drops in South Africa, the business is going to be done. And then he said that his current business has started to pick up again, and now it's this massive distraction where he's now managing 2 businesses. They've done super well, though. They've landed some of the, I think, 3 listed companies since starting, and it's been a big success. So even though it's been stressful, we have seen a pattern of a lot of entrepreneurs where their business has been wiped out. They've started to pick up, especially if they're in the service-based space. But that's obviously very industry dependent. The next one is Rightland. So Rightland basically is a company. They do online clothing for women, targeting basically the black middle class market. And what they did is they saw the whole thing coming, and they actually iterated to mask and sanitizer before lockdown. They had a record month, did 7x revenue, and then 3x revenue, and then 1x. So it just went like this. So they just got in early. And I think that the big lessons there, he said, is that everyone goes for the obvious opportunities. The other one is they got shut down on Shopify, and they weren't able to do Facebook ads or Google ads. So building on other people's platform, or that being your channel, was a problem. And then the big value side effect of that is that he got all of this extra business, but what it resulted in is he was able to then remarket to this now much bigger database. So his sort of lesson learned there was that if you're going to chase a kind of COVID-related opportunity, you almost want to do it as a marketing strategy rather than like actually build a business around it. The next one was Alpha Video. So this is a company in the community which does production. So they do ads and stuff like that for the TV ads and YouTube ads and stuff like that. And what they did is they got completely wiped out. Zero business when lockdown happened. And what they did is instead launch a low-cost monthly offering where what they would do is you pay them 10 or 20 grand a month, and they'll create a couple of videos that they could actually create during lockdown, which would target the SME market as opposed to the bigger corporate market. And the big lessons learned there for him was that while they found all of these other opportunities when they really sat down and looked, like they were sitting on other opportunities that they didn't have time to explore. And then work then picked up again a couple months later, but they've now better leveraged the asset, and they now have a new product line to the business. So I think if you look at where it's slightly different to Devon's pivot, is that the pivot basically, if you do, ideally you want to make it that it's something like not totally different to what your current business is, because then it sort of complements what you're doing when your other business picks up, when this is coming back online in 2 years time, or 1 year, or whenever it comes back online. The final pivot was not a Civitas member, but I thought an amazing idea that I think was going to do super well. I don't know how well they've done, but when I saw it, I wanted to buy it, and I mentioned it to a couple of people, and they wanted to buy it, and I was like, wow, these guys are going to print money if they can execute on the idea. And the idea was that they were a production house, also being wiped out like the previous production house. And they saw the opportunity of home studio setups for Zoom calls. So it was such an amazing experience because I met with these guys the first time, and I jumped online, and there they were, and they looked like they were from like an E-News TV with those amazing backgrounds, videos playing in the background, perfect lighting. And it was just like such an amazing experience. And really what they did, which I think is so clever, is that remote work's not going away. It's going to be much, much bigger going forward. So it's not like a once-off COVID opportunity. It's a permanent change in the world. And it was an obvious opportunity for every salesperson, for Investec, or every CEO or entrepreneur who wants to look impressive. Just really, really clever opportunity, and they reach product market fit straight away. So I think the big lessons there on the coronavirus pivots is that iterate rather than pivot if you can. aim to solve problems that are going to be around in the long term. Use short-term problems to develop your database and maybe make some money if you can't trade, and then use your downtime to develop additional product lines to your current business, if possible. So if you guys want, I know a lot of people have been hurt by this whole COVID thing. I'm very happy to spend half an hour with anyone and throw around some ideas. We can put together a pivot list if any of you guys are interested. Just drop me a mail. It's paul@civitas.network. If I can, we've been lucky enough not to be impacted and have actually grown through this period. So if I can help anyone who's struggling, very, very happy to do that and try and make any intros to potential new customers or other people that can maybe help if they're trying to explore suppliers. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any questions or comments. Yeah, thanks for the time, and hopefully that was some good ideas to help you out. Okay.
So there's nothing that's come through in the chat box. Would everyone like to unmute if there's any questions for Paul?
Has anyone got a pivot idea that they potentially are looking at and would like to have a quick chat about it? I could maybe give you some ideas on how to test it.
Seems like too much food for thought.
Cool. Awesome. Well, guys, I hope some of you take me up on the offer, and I hope, if not, you use some of these ideas to
I've got a question.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Martine.
Hi, Martine.
So I'm an events manager, and yeah, I'm one of those lucky ones who the events industry is pretty much closed down. But most people spoke about, you know, going on to online events. I haven't found that so successful for myself because the platforms really are free. So yeah, I mean, I know it's a big question out there, but how does, I think the question is, how does one go about thinking of the different ideas, in which direction to pivot or iterate, or, you know, it's like asking for a magic light bulb to be switched on.
Cool. So I think probably the best way to do it is to maybe talk to people. So I'm sure you had your event solved some kind of problem for people, and it's thinking around what are those problems and can we solve them in a different way. So for example, at the moment, like for us, we would love a common problem is like networking, meeting people for entrepreneurs. So I'm wanting to new customers. I used to go to events. I used to pick up a whole bunch of leads. How do we now make that thing happen in the online world? And maybe it requires a slightly different model. The nice thing about doing anything online is that to test, it's for free. So you can play a lot. So it's almost like you can try stuff every second day to see what's going to get traction and what's awesome. But I know, as someone, like, I can just give you some of my problems is I'm in lockdown alone. I'm also like, I haven't not meeting any people out of work. So that's like a problem. Is like
other pairs.
Yeah, but I think talking to people for those solutions is probably going to be the best bet. If you want, I could do a half an hour with you, and I could probably give you a list of 5 or 10 good ideas to test, which I think are around good business models.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I'll send you an email.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. Someone said, what about the restaurant industry? So I'll tell you about 2 companies I know that have pivoted in the restaurant game and shop. So on the shop side, there's a lot of people who've just gone online. So I know from a couple of the dev shops, they're booming right now because a lot of the offline shops are going online. And then the second one is around the restaurant game. I know a person who was delivering microgreens and herbs and stuff to 140 restaurants. They were doing really well. They were growing like mad. 2 years old, and obviously their whole thing it's been zero since then. But he had contacts in the food industry because he would. So what he's been doing is got involved with a whole bunch of the nonprofits and now doing food parcel deliveries. So he's using his contacts at sort of the fruit market and his understanding there, and they've got in there with sort of, I think, the guy who's behind Kaiser Chiefs and a couple of those. So that's been one successful. The other one, probably slightly less successful, was a guy who went to veggie boxes, where he was delivering veggie boxes for customers at a lower cost. Sort of, you get order a big box online. He just targeted all his friends and went to all of the I Love Parkhurst groups and managed to get some kind of traction. And then what are the other ones I've seen in the restaurant game? Some online stuff, and then I think the ghost kitchens. So ghost kitchens was a massive trend before the whole lockdown period, and it's going to grow now because of the whole COVID thing. So I think looking at doing something around ghost kitchens, if you can leverage your skill set there. If you don't know what ghost kitchens are, they're basically kitchens which are in low-cost rental areas, which cook the food and then sell on Uber Eats. So they basically, and that's a massive trend in that's obviously going to boom. So getting involved in that industry, I think, is a no-brainer if there's opportunity there.
Well, what do you see as the impact post-COVID? Is business going to change a lot, or will we go back to a lot of what we did before?
Sure. John, I take Charlie Munger's viewpoint there. So I'm very ignorant little guy. I don't really know. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, they're just going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see. I think the way I think about how do you plan for that is think through scenarios. So you go, okay, cool. If COVID's going to last 3 years, what's going to happen? How am I going to handle that? If COVID's going to last a year, how am I going to handle that? If things change and remote work stays, how am I going to handle that? So I think that's sort of, for me, the best way to think about how to operate in such an uncertain, unknown time. It's just a bunch of scenarios, Clemson to start, you know?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good organized. Okay. Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
It's Tony.
Hi, Tony.
I was in competitions. So
Oh,
I've actually
yes.
met you and done one of the 3-day things, which was really amazing. So I'm in the delivery industry at the moment. We rent the bikes and everything. So you're talking about all the restaurants. I dealt with a lot of people who had to deliver. They had to actually just pivot their businesses from no delivery to delivery. And it's amazing how people actually, they adapt. And now they have to adapt to having the restaurants open without people coming in. But it's been good to see how through this, the way people have pivoted, and in all, I do three different businesses, but that's the one. And so if anyone's in the restaurant industry, they are surviving with delivery now. It's just something that you have to have. So it's
amazing how people, just to build on that, it's been super cool to see how many people have just gone, cool, I'm going to make something work. And they've just hustled and somehow managed to make something work. It's been very inspiring. We've had a lot of guys do that and girls, and it's been wonderful to see.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Really good to see you again, hey?
Yeah, you too.
Enjoying your work out in the sun there. Cool.
So, Paul, thank you so much for your gracious offer of a 30-minute session with anyone that's been on your webinar today. I will post, if you don't mind, your email address in the post-webinar communication. And for me, specifically from an Ortjet perspective, we've been seeing so many businesses and we've had really successful pivot stories over the last 2 months or so. I think the thing that I'd like really take away that resonates so much with me is the more you commit to something, the more you value it. And I think that is really the essence of pivoting. Are there any other questions? Because otherwise I'll be chatting to Paul all day. So are there any other questions for Paul this afternoon?
Cool. Cool, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Paul, on behalf of Jet, the team. So valuable as always, and it's really an honor to have you spend time with us. We all take away such key insights and valuable advice this afternoon.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you